Palestine, Gaza, and Israeli truce. Obviously, there's a lot of celebrations right now as hostages are being returned to each other, and everyone's singing and dancing and all that good stuff. But my friends, the fat lady has not sung yet. The peace process is not over, and it's still underway. And though we're seeing these hostages being exchanged, the killing inside of Gaza is still ongoing and will likely continue ongoing for the foreseeable future. See, right now, Hamas is, how do I want to phrase this? They're attacking and killing other factions within the Gazan territory right now. I won't call it a civil war necessarily, but they are fighting and killing each other. They're trying to maintain dominance because other party players are seeing the opportunity to try and gain some power. This was yesterday. I didn't get a chance to do a stream on this channel yesterday, but this was what I was going to talk about at that point. But basically, you've got a bunch of people getting killed as Hamas and other groups are vying for power. And this will be important later for actual peace processes. So I'll give you an excerpt from this article. This was from Fox News. This was yesterday. Dozens have been killed in Gaza during violent fighting on Sunday and within hours of the expected release of hostages in the war-torn region, according to local reports. The clashes between local militias also came ahead of a televised address in which Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the imminent hostage release the beginning of a new path. Obviously, that has now transpired. The Israeli president had cautioned that the campaign is not over and there are still very great security challenges ahead of us. Locals said gunfire, meanwhile, had sent families fleeing in panic. So much for peace for the Gazans because their own people are now killing each other. Because if we're being honest with each other, with ourselves here, Hamas is made up of almost entirely monsters and they are not going to stop killing until they are put down themselves, I believe. I don't think there's any way to have peace long term with the vile monsters that make up Hamas. Now, this time, the BBC said people weren't fleeing Israeli attacks. They were running from their own people. And according to reports via Israeli outlet Ynet, the violence erupted when Hamas militants raided the neighborhood of Sabra in Gaza City, home to a clan called Dogmush, also known as the Al-Dogmush family militia. The report said the Hamas Interior Ministry had accused the militia of attacking its forces, while members of the Dogmush clan said Hamas had exploited the ceasefire to target them over alleged cooperation with Israel. They said, a relative of the clan said, children are screaming and dying. They are burning our houses. We are trapped. I don't know how they entered with all kinds of weapons. Where were they when the Jews were here? They arrested all the youths, lined them up against walls, pointed weapons at their heads. There was a massacre here. So this is what's ongoing while the peace process is happening. So there is a problem with this. I would not be celebrating just yet. Now, it's good news where we're at, but it is not at all over yet. So let's move into the article today. This is from The Guardian, a left-wing news rag. Israelis and Palestinians are celebrating as truce begins hope of era of peace. The UN warns Gaza still needs life-saving aid as world leaders gather in Sharm el-Sheikh to discuss a 20-point proposal. There was a rare moment of joy among Israelis and Palestinians on Monday as Hamas released the remaining 20 living hostages in Gaza as part of a swap deal for nearly 2,000 Palestinian detainees. Man. Oof, what a swap there. On a day, world leaders met in Egypt to try to ensure the current limited truce is extended into a durable peace. Donald Trump said the prayers of millions have finally been answered, and he declared at the peace summit with his counterparts lined up behind him that at long last we have peace in the Middle East. Or at least, maybe, if we're lucky, the beginning stages of one. Now, the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, called for the ceasefire in Gaza to usher in a new era in the Middle East. Frankly, I think a lot of these countries, especially after seeing Israel hitting them all, would be happy if this would just go away. Hamas thought that they were going to get the entire Middle East to join them. This is my personal opinion here. I can't prove this, but I think the attack on October 7th was designed to get all the other Arab nations to join them in a campaign of eradication. It didn't work out, obviously, but that was the plan. And so I think now all these countries are tired of getting their teeth kicked in both by Israel and then our occasional jumping into the fray like with Iran to put the boot down on the faces of these militant leaders. Now, the Egyptian president said, "Let the Gaza war be the last of wars in the region." In Tel Aviv, an estimated 65,000 Israelis gathered in Hostages Square and cheered when a military helicopter carrying the 20 freed Israelis flew over the crowd on the way to a nearby hospital. Live footage of their release and their family reunions was broadcast on large screens around the square. The plaza has been the center of the national campaign for their release since 250 Israelis were abducted on the October 7th, 2023 attack by Hamas on southern Israeli communities that killed over 1,200 people and started this current war. Now, the bodies of 4 hostages held in Gaza and handed over to the Red Cross by Hamas on Monday were brought back to Israel, the army said. Checking to see if chat's working here. Okay. Now, a large crowd also amassed in the southern Gazan city of Khan Yunis on Monday to celebrate the return of nearly 1,700 Palestinians detained over the course of the war. While in the West Bank, capital of Ramallah, people welcomed the arrival of 88 Palestinian detainees who had been serving life sentences imposed by Israeli courts. At least one had been imprisoned for 24 years, and about 160 more were deported through Egypt after their release. The Public Committee Against Torture in Israel said almost all Palestinian detainees had been held without trial as unlawful combatants. There's always going to be people that are self-defeating here. Just as you had sympathizers when the Nazis took over France, so will you have people like that in Israel, I guess. Never seems to fail. And it noted that there were 22 minors among those released, some of the 360 Palestinian minors held in Israeli custody. The ceasefire appeared to be holding in Gaza as well on Monday after a 2-year Israeli military onslaught that has killed nearly 68,000 people. But 2.1 million surviving Palestinians there still face a deep and complex humanitarian crisis in a sealed coastal strip where the overwhelming majority of homes have been destroyed or severely damaged, the price of war, and which has been starved of humanitarian supplies for many months. Well, and I hate to break it to you, but they're going to continue to be in this holding pattern until they deal with Hamas. They want $50 billion for repairs of the Gazan Strip, but nobody in their right mind is going to invest that kind of money if Hamas is still at the controls, at the levers of power. You're just building a house on quicksand. Now, Trump, writes The Guardian, who brokered the ceasefire last week, arrived in the Red Sea resort after a short visit to Israel, and he declared a new day is rising and signed a joint declaration with the leaders of Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, and intended to turn the ceasefire into a coherent peace plan. They have their work cut out for them. Now, the last Gaza ceasefire broke down after 2 months in March when Israel resumed its offensive because they were playing games with returning the hostages. There are fears in the region that the truce may also prove precarious, especially given the resistance from the far right wing of the Israel. I'll always blame Israel on this one. I see. Especially given the resistance from the far right wing of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition. Trump insisted his 20-point proposal for maintaining peace and rebuilding Gaza would take root. The documents, he said, sets out a whole series of rules and regulations and is very comprehensive. The contents of the declaration signed in Sharm el-Sheikh were not immediately made public, and the aspirations expressed in Trump's 20 points involving the disarmament of Hamas and the deployment of stabilization force under a technocratic Palestinian committee overseen by a peace board, which would be chaired by Donald Trump himself or the U.S. president at an extremely challenging task. Because Hamas, of course, does not want to get out of here. And I think that's going to be the real problem here, is that Hamas is not wanting to be exiled. They don't want to disarm. And they're going to do everything in their power to remain there. The crux of Trump's 20-point plan is going to be the demilitarization of Hamas, of Gaza. They have lost the right to have any kind of military force there because for decades and decades, they have been trying to kill Jews. We're talking 20,000 rockets fired into Israel from 2006 to 2022. 425 suicide bombings from 2000 to 2005. All Hamas. They never end. It's been over 20 years of trying to start a war with Israel, and they finally got their teeth kicked in But you better damn well believe that if they are anywhere at the levers of power or remain within Gaza, they will endlessly try to regain power. I don't care who's in charge there. So this peace plan wants them to hand over the weapons to independent monitors and then to hand over a power to this Palestinian committee supervised by this so-called peace board. But at the same time, you've got a-holes like the military chief, Mohammed Dazal, who is publicly rejecting this peace plan, insisting that they will keep their weapons until and unless a full Palestinian state emerges, meaning they will find a way to either be directly in power or find a way to remain in control by proxy. It's kind of like Mexico right now, which is essentially controlled by the cartels. Yeah, you've got President Scheinbaum in there, but she's just a stoolie. She's just a goober being run by the cartel. That's why she is keeping on her predecessor's hugs, not bullets plan, which is basically no longer trying to kill the cartel, but instead do outreach for the poor. She's compromised. It's done. And they want to do the same thing here in Gaza, make no mistake. But, if you want peace in Gaza, I'm just going to say it, but you have to eradicate these Hamas monsters. Either by getting them to leave, be exiled to whatever shithole they want to go to, or by the barrel of a gun. I don't see there's any other way to end this. Because make no mistake, if you want this to end, one side has to unconditionally surrender. It has to end. Just like in World War II, just like in every great war where there's a final ending, where there's not a continuous hatred that devolves into future wars, you have to have one side completely capitulate and say, unconditionally, we're done. We don't want to do this anymore. That's what happened with the Germans after the 1940s. They got tired of getting curb stomped by the Americans and by the Russians. And to this day, they have not tried to attack America or Europe again. Not to say that they wouldn't down the road, but you've had decades and decades and decades and decades of a peaceful Germany. How did that happen? They got the shit kicked out of them. They got their face curb stomped. And that's the only way to deal with these kind of monsters. Because make no mistake, if the shoe was on the other foot, if Israel said, you know what, we are tired of being the oppressors or whatever, and they unconditionally surrendered to Hamas or to any one of these other powers in the region, they would be annihilated. You would see true genocide. You would see millions of Jews vanish. They're not the same. So if you want there to be a future, then you have to see Hamas be silenced once and for all. Either remove them or eliminate them. And I think Israel is prepared to eliminate them if they don't come to the table and get rid of their weapons. That's what I think. Let's see. Now, let's go down here and see if they got anything else in here that's relevant. No. So what I see happening right now is Hamas is going to continue to posture and try not to surrender. And even though Israel is no longer going to go back to the meat grinding for now of the Palestinians within Gaza, you're not going to see the bloodshed end because Hamas is going to continue to try to kill their own people who stand in their way of maintaining power. So Palestinians are still going to die. Sharon asks, when were they supposed to be disarmed? That's part of this new 20-point peace plan, so it's supposed to be sometime in the near future. Israel says that they will withdraw from the Gazan Strip that they have conquered, taken over, once they can prove that Hamas has been disarmed. So that would be the prerequisite of that. So that hasn't yet happened. But that's supposedly what's in the works. And I just don't see how Hamas is going to stand down here. I think a lot of them are worried that that the violence that they incurred on the Jews and on their own citizens, who, if they were disarmed, might try to kill them for all the terror that they've inflicted on their own people, I think they don't see a way out is kind of my guess here as to why they're going to fight so hard. And if you want to see Gaza rebuilt, because they say that they want to give $50 billion for reconstruction, then Hamas has to be pushed out. So I think for the short term, the people of Gaza are going to continue to live in bleak conditions. You're going to have problems with starvation. Even if you bring food in there, life is going to be horrifying and horrible. And there's no end in sight because Hamas is going to try to hang in there. And in fact, I think they're going to try to take advantage of life being miserable because most of Gaza is nothing but rubble. And with no outside funds, there's nowhere for them to rebuild it. So they're kind of foobarred. So, but what are you going to do? Because again, bottom line, Hamas, unless they're pushed out and Israel's not going to take anything less, we know that they've already shown us decades of violent, practically inhuman behaviors. And if Israel screws around here and doesn't bring this to an end once and for all, given time, Hamas will rise again once more and will try to murder and kill Jews and continue the cycle again. Let me reiterate. Never forget, Hamas has been doing this for almost 25 years now. They were formed back in the late 80s, but really they started their bloodshed cycle in the early 2000s. You had over 425 suicide bombings from 2000 to 2005. After they took control of Gaza, then they got the better weapons. Then they began launching missiles at Israel for nearly 15 years. 20,000 rockets fired from Palestine, from Gaza, into Israel. Israel didn't wipe them out because, believe you me, if it had been us, if it had been the United States being attacked by, say, Mexico, do you think we would have sat around for 15 years and 20,000 missiles being fired into our territory? No. Mexico would be gone already. They would either be glass or they would be conquered. But Israel was not allowed to win. Israel doesn't care what the European Union says, but they do care about what the United States says. And it wasn't until you had President Vegetables, a.k.a. Joe Biden, where they finally had the guts to just say, fuck it, this guy's he's barely alive. We're just going to go deal with it ourselves. But they've always acquiesced to presidents saying, okay, that's a proportionate response. Stop trying to wipe out Hamas. And then they would have peace. And then you'd have a few months of everything being fine. And then the rocket attacks would begin again. And it just over and over and over again for decades. So the worst thing that Israel could do now would be to try to rebuild without making sure that Hamas is eradicated. So, who knows? Israel, their own political will is being spent here. Their people were only willing to go along with the war because of Hamas's 9/11 style attack. When you have this massive massacre occur, that was enough to where the citizens, all right, said, fuck it. And there were still a lot of Israelis who were there who were unhappy with Israel defending themselves. There's a lot of people who have a death wish, I think, and Israel is no different from the rest of the world, I guess. So, long and the short of it is, Israel must finish the mission here if you want peace. If Hamas doesn't disarm, they need to be exterminated or pushed out. No ifs, no ands, no buts. So, this is a fight for survival, my friends. And it's either going to be the Jews that survive, or it's going to be the Palestinians, or Hamas gets eradicated. So, pick your poison, I guess. So, I know a lot of people are celebrating, and it is a great day, and, all that good stuff. So, great job, I guess, Trump. But it's not over. And it won't, I, for one, am not going to, breathe a sigh of relief that it's over until I see Hamas disarming. And even then, you got to kind of keep your fingers crossed that somehow you can ensure that these people are out of power. And I guess disarming would be the quickest way to make sure that it happens. Where if you get rid of most of the weapons, maybe. But again, I think they're worried that if they disarm, that they too will face the wrath of their own people. So, so that's pretty much it. That's kind of what I wanted to touch on today. It's another semi-short stream. I had a couple of side stories I thought maybe we could delve into if you guys were up for it. But just kind of a light touch. I saw this right before I went on the air, and I had to wrap myself around this. Where is this out of? Hey, Sam. Welcome to the chat. So this was, I guess, in Philadelphia. So you had a school teacher that had like 22 stabbings. And they keep ruling her death a suicide. And I guess she even got stabbed in the spine. But it's still a suicide. Let's just dive into this and see what they have to say about this. I didn't get a chance to fully vet the article, but I couldn't believe what I was reading. So this is Fox News by Emma Busey. She says, Ellen Greenberg's controversial death ruled suicide again. New report, quote, deeply flawed, says the lawyer of the family, I guess. Ellen Greenberg's death has once again been ruled a suicide following a new review by the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office, according to media reports. Per People, the report reaffirms that Greenberg, a 27-year-old Philadelphia school teacher, died by suicide despite sustaining 20 stab wounds to her back, her neck, and head with a knife found protruding from her chest. Which, can I say, does not make any sense to me? I mean, I know I'm not a detective, and I'm certainly not in any position of authority here, but how? Now, Greenberg, Fox News writes, who taught first grade at Juniata Park Academy, was found dead in her locked apartment on January 26, back in 2011, after returning home early from work due because of a snowstorm. And her fiancé, Samuel Goldberg, said he discovered her body after forcing open the door when she didn't respond. Goldberg was never a suspect and was never charged with any crime. The circumstances, including multiple stab wounds and no signs of forced entry, have fueled years of debate and legal challenges from her family over whether her death was self-inflicted. I just want to know how you stab yourself in the back, among other things. I'm just so confused. Now, the new ruling sparked backlash with the Greenberg family attorney, Joseph Pedraza, saying in a statement that the review was deeply flawed, attempt to justify a predetermined conclusion. It includes false claims, like the assertion that a stab wound in Ellen's spinal column was made during the autopsy, a theory rejected by every credible expert. So they said that, okay, so the spinal column stabbing, they're trying to blame on the autopsy. A theory rejected by every credible expert, says the lawyer, including the city's own neuropathologist. By ignoring key evidence that contradicts suicide, the extensive 3D photogrammetry, a recreation which proves Ellen could not self-inflict all the wounds, unexplained bruises, missing surveillance footage, and intact lock, accounts of a toxic relationship, he said. Greenberg's death was initially ruled a homicide in 2011 before Assistant Medical Examiner Dr. Marlon Osborne changed the manner of death to suicide after meeting with Philadelphia police investigators. Chief Medical Examiner Lindsay Simon led the most recent review as part of settlement with Greenberg's parents, who have spent years contesting the suicide finding. AW says, let's see if the animals can keep their word. Yeah, that's going to be the challenge, right, with Hamas. And that's where I think it's smart. Israel's not going to fully withdraw or move their troops out until they see it. And Bibi Netanyahu is making it clear that if they do not, they're going to go back in and they're going to remove Hamas themselves. Basically continue the war. Now back to the stabbing story. Per People, the new report said that while the distribution of injuries is admittedly unusual, the fact remains that Ellen would be capable of inflicting these injuries herself, noting she was a young woman suffering from anxiety. I don't know, man. 20 stabbings on yourself? I mean, I guess anything's possible, but damn. The chief medical examiner wrote that the fiancé's DNA was not detected on the knife used to inflict the injuries and that there was no evidence of an abusive relationship or a struggle at the scene. With all this information considered, it is the opinion of the undersigned that the manner of Ellen Greenberg's death is best classified as suicide, the report said. In his statement, Pedraza said Simon's report was an embarrassment to the city and an insult to Ellen and her family. And he said Ellen's family just wanted the truth. It is clear that the truth will not come out from Philadelphia's law enforcement machinery. Though Ellen's city turned its back on her, we will continue through other avenues to get justice for her murder by any means necessary. Well, it looks like they are not going to let that happen in the city of Philadelphia. So, I don't know. That's... I just... That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, I'll be honest. So... but anyway, yeah, I had a few other stories like that on tap, but I thought I'd share that with you because that made no sense to me. That being said, I'm going to keep this stream relatively short. There's still some errors I'm getting reported by YouTube from the stream software itself, so I got to go ahead and try and fix that, but I'll do that offline. Just wanted to pop on and do a little stream with you guys and say hi as always. So again, thank you so much for joining me, and happy birthday to Wolf, our fabulous moderator. He turned 1 year more powerful today, and he says he's going to do a lot of backflips to celebrate that. I don't know what that means, but I figured I would share. So once again, friends, thank you so much for joining me. We'll try to do longer live streams down in the near future. I have a lot of things I'm juggling right now, so trying to get everything in there to do longer show prep takes time. But again, thanks for joining me, and once again, happy birthday to the Wolfster. I've not called him that before, but figured I'd try it out on the air. So again, I will see you all next time, and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your evening.